Doing it live. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another Street Epistemology call-in show. Welcome, everyone. Hopefully we get some callers today. If not, we'll just keep chatting amongst ourselves about SE. So you had something to say, Chucky, or a question.
Hello.
Oh, I thought we were doing a very ill-orchestrated Mexican wave just then, and you let me down. Somebody let me down. I was following Chucky on that one. Fair enough. Yeah, hot take, Chucky. What was your... we were re-entering the hot...
Yeah.
About SE call-in shows in general, right?
Yeah, and they're terrible.
We're trying to figure out what we should do on this show. One of the ideas is to take live SE calls. That's one of the goals, is to have people call in with claims, because I think that in order to understand SE, you need to watch it and see the process, and maybe in a more direct way than even the review shows, right? We're in the middle of doing one. I think that would be fun.
Yeah. So my counter to that would be, I think there are lots of examples of SE happening, like, and probably in a better context. And the context of an SE call-in show may be disharmonious to the efficacy of the method.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if there's a more pretentious way I could have said those words. After working out.
Our first caller. Perry,
cool.
Love that name. What's up?
Hello,
hey,
everyone.
welcome.
Can you hear me?
Hi. Yeah,
loud and clear.
Yep.
So I wanted to call in either one to discuss an article I posted recently that I think Reid read, actually. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do know what you're talking about, yeah.
Okay, either that or I want to make a SE claim. And the SE claim is reincarnation.
Oh, excellent. I feel like both of these are great. Reid, do you have the ability to put up the blog post, or maybe we'll post a link to it too?
So suddenly it's an embarrassment of riches in terms of content now.
Yeah. I put the link in the chat, or at least I've tried to.
Yeah, so here's your claim, basically. Street epistemology should focus on critical social justice instead of Christianity.
Right.
And some people are claiming, Chucky, you had the, question of, like, does SE at this point focus on Christianity?
So my immediate, so I have to admit, I did not read the article very carefully, which is, it is what it is. But I feel like there is a premise behind in the title or in the claim that maybe I don't even agree with. I feel like I certainly don't seek out people to have religious discussions with. I merely talk about what people want to talk about.
Right. That was my immediate response, is like, I don't think street epistemology should seek anything out in particular. I think the first question you ask somebody when you're doing like a street-based interview is like, what claim would you like to explore? Like, do you have a claim? Like, you're not saying, actually, that's not entirely true. Because like Reid, I think you definitely have like a list of claims to prompt people, like a board, right, with a few claims to suggest that people can engage with. But do you feel that that's because those are claims, Reid, that you wish to engage with? Or do you feel that that's because it helps prompt people as to what even a claim is and helps give them some context to think about?
Yeah, sometimes I put a specific, like, yes/no question, which will immediately get us to a claim. Sometimes I just put like one word, like a topic, and then we can just talk about the topic and then fish around for a claim related to it, or just a broad question that can give me a bunch of topics, and then we narrow it down based on one topic.
Right.
But sorry, Will.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, one thing that I've been doing to give some concrete example is I tell people to go look at the Reddit called Change My View, which, if you haven't seen it, you should go check it out, because it's basically list after list after list of claims that people are making. And people, they read 10 of them and one of them grabs their eye and they goes, oh, I have a feeling about that.
So Parisia, do you feel, am I pronouncing that right, by the way?
I just say Parisia. Yeah, that's fine.
Parisia. Thank you. Do you feel like SE then? Do you feel like SE up until this point has been focused on Christianity, and like what's your perspective there?
So I think that because it started in the atheist community with a manual for creating atheists, I think there's more of a focus on sort of metaphysical and spiritual beliefs, and I think most people would probably agree with that. If you look at like maybe Anthony Magnabosco's videos, you'll see most of them, or almost, the majority are spiritual claims, interaction with Mormons, Christians, these sorts of things.
Yeah, I think that's certainly true. I mean, there's certainly no shortage of spiritual or religious based claims in street epistemology, but I think might that be because religion's been around a little bit longer than sort of modern day narratives around social justice, for example, rather than it street epistemology being specifically seeking out religious claims?
I do think that I think that there is a focus on spiritual claims. Yeah. I mean, I think, I just think in interactions, typically, I guess Reid does it less so. He has a more wide variety of topics typically. Anthony Magnabosco usually does sort of seems like spiritual or religious-based beliefs more often. I think that those beliefs are more prevalent in society, and I think that at the time where street epistemology was getting started, that was a much more common set of beliefs to have than critical social justice is currently. This has been a more recent phenomenon. And so I can see at that time, maybe there was more of a focus on critical social, or there's more of a focus on religion, partially for that reason. Yeah.
So how would you focus SE then? What do you think street epistemologists should do to help choose the topics that they're interacting with?
So one example could be if, well, one thing to note is like, I'm not opposed to doing SE on religious people or their claims. And I think that I made the case in it that I think there should be a little bit of saying, look, I'm going to examine your belief, and if you don't want to change your mind, then you probably shouldn't engage with me, basically. So I think that, and it should be kind of context specific. I gave some examples of when Anthony Magnabosco was kind of unwilling to do SE because of somebody's deeply held religious belief. They said that they would go back to drugs, alcohol, and become suicidal, something like this. And then also another example recently, I think on stream, someone was saying that they would become a bad person, that they would hurt people. Now, these are extreme circumstances, but like in cases like those, I would say you probably shouldn't engage in SE. So I think that there should be more of a priority on critical social justice because it's more of an issue. And the way to do that would probably be, do you have, like, some people will list specific beliefs. Maybe one of them they could list is stuff related to critical social justice advocacy. Like Reid could have those claims on his list of things that you could possibly talk about. What if, yeah.
Well, this is a little meta, Reid.
What is happening?
Yeah, this is like a review inception. Like, yeah, we covered this topic just a few days ago on this review stream where we basically didn't even review the video. We kind of had a conversation about, the ethics.
Right.
Where's that line at?
I love this because I think the video was like 3 minutes and the review was 2 hours.
You think this is bad? You wait until somebody later on makes a reference to this conversation where we have to reference that.
I mean,
I was interested. Sorry, just one real quick thing. I was interested that you referred to doing street epistemology on somebody as opposed to with somebody, and I wondered if there wasn't something in that like use of language, because to me, I feel like it's doing something with somebody, like it's working with somebody, as opposed to like it's not like a martial. Like we were joking in that previous review show that was referenced that Anthony was being billed as like. It was like he was a boxer going up against another heavyweight, and it was this kind of like fight of the cage match thing. And I think that that's a really unfortunate sort of framing of street epistemology. I think it definitely has to be a collaborative thing. It's not a set of predefined moves, I think, that you can make. But yeah, I just noticed that. Sorry guys, I know you guys wanted to jump.
I was just going to say that this does bring up the question of how do you neutrally ask for claims, or do we neutrally ask for claims? Because I do think that you can see how some content is kind of skewed towards spirituality, and Reid is clearly choosing some topics on the board. I mean, you always keep it open to whatever they want. And it is really challenging when you're asking someone, and I've tried this on the street, so to speak, of, I just want to talk about anything that's on your mind. you know, and it seems so vague.
I bet you
That
don't.
people they immediately ask for examples, right? And so then now you're kind of injecting your ideas in, and so how do you avoid that, or should we avoid it?
I don't know. I would agree it's something we should work on, though, because I find myself falling into the trap of like what kind of things, and it's like, oh, you know, religion, spirituality, flat Earth, you know, and then you've framed it. You've already fallen into that trap. So I think it's a really good question. Is this the board you have out? Oh, here we go.
Yeah, here's the last time I went out live, like last month or so. You know, I've got the war, war with Ukraine.
Yeah.
Biggest problem no one is talking about. Which cultural norms must be conserved, and does anything supernatural exist? Keeping it classic SE there. So
that's right under a thing that says today's topic. So would you not be you would be prepared? I assume to talk about other things, but you've not necessarily made that or anything else. Okay, there we go.
Yeah. Gotta have that at the bottom too.
Yeah, totally. That's interesting. I'm alarmed at your ability to pull up relevant video footage at a moment's notice. This is quite uncanny.
Yeah.
So why do you feel like Parahisia? So why do you feel like critical race theory is perhaps more important than talking about religious narratives today?
Great question.
So I guess I could give an example. So if there's a like widely held belief that zebras didn't exist in society or something like this would be pretty absurd, and you could probably easily get someone to stop believing that. You could just take them to a zoo or show them a zebra. But I don't think that would be actually particularly important to society for people to believe that zebras exist. Whereas there are some beliefs that are more harmful than others. So I think a good example would be like widespread vaccine hesitancy would be a major issue. So if you had someone that sat down in your chair who would maybe have pre-existing conditions, it would be a better use of your time to convince them to not be vaccine hesitant than to convince them that zebras are real, although it would be much easier to convince them that zebras are real. So
I'd like to push back on this, and I guess either with SE or not with SE, but I'm tempted just to maybe I'll push back without SE, and then somebody else can SE you on the claim that you wanted to talk about.
Sure.
So here's the thing: the way that I see it, if there's a widespread belief in society that zebras don't exist, there's probably reasons that anti-zebrists use to justify their their conspiracy theory or their idea that zebras are a myth. These lines of reasoning get spread and talked about, and videos are made. Big alphabet needs an animal for Z, and so they invented the zebra. But these things aren't only about zebras, right? These lines of reasoning, these ways of looking at evidence, these things apply to everything. And so I, as a personal example, when I stopped believing in religion, almost immediately, I also stopped believing in ghosts and alien abductions and the Loch Ness Monster, and it just all fell away. So I think these things really go together. And for a lot of people, religion is like the most important belief that they have. But that's obviously not an SE kind of argument against your point. That's just an argument.
No, I think that's great, because like to me, again, it's like refocusing on epistemology. It really doesn't matter what the claim is, and I know people in the community are almost exploring the idea of trying to not even find out what the claim is, yet still explore the epistemology. I'm not 100% convinced about that, but if it can be made to work, I think that would be great, because like, yeah, what we're trying to do is get people to notice that their epistemology is not great. And if their epistemology is not great on the zebra issue, it's probably also not great on a whole bunch of other issues. And I think that in some ways the claim isn't really that important to the attention that they're paying to their critical thinking skills.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who were doing just thought experiments about what would it take for you to believe that I had a Ferrari. We were talking about this last week. And I think getting away from the idea of claims at all is what Will was talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, look, I see Digital Gnosis in the chat, and he had a really interesting conversation with this guy Gregory Dawes, and they made this interesting claim. It's really, we're not talking so much when we're talking about religious individual claims. We're talking about really webs of belief. Here's what they're talking about that.
He's right that we're not just comparing individual claims. We're comparing networks of claims on each side, which are linked with one another. It's a bit like, Quine's point about a web of belief. In each case, you've got webs of belief, and therefore arguments which attack individual beliefs without taking into account the fact that they're connected with other beliefs within a network are not going to get you very far.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Lisa.
Hey, Lisa.
Hi.
Oh, we're hearing a bit of feedback.
Yeah,
I'm just
listening. Sorry, Lisa. Add some headphones, Lisa, and then we'll get back to you.
I think we. Sorry, Don.
I was just going to comment that it sounds like I'm hearing like an unstated assumption that these ideas of critical race theory, or well, I actually didn't say that. Critical. What was the term you used?
Critical social justice, I think was the term.
Okay, critical social justice. That web of ideas, as well as spiritual ideas, both have poor underlying epistemology. And I feel like I'm hearing that assumption, which may be justified, but it's something that I think the point is to explore with SE, right? And so, these worldviews, that is what we're trying to explore. So how do we decide what should we explore? Well, maybe it should be just foundational worldviews in general.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do we explore I don't know what you would call it, the materialistic worldview? Should we explore that just as thoroughly?
Naturalism, maybe.
Right.
Madonna's third album.
So I think kind of the argument that's being made is if we can critically analyze a certain part of the web of beliefs, we can kind of give them sort of better critical thinking skills that they can apply across all domains of their life, improving their reasoning, generally speaking. So like in your example, you were Christian, but you also had beliefs about ghosts and things like that. And by learning why Christianity is wrong, this helps you to understand why other beliefs about were wrong as well.
Right.
I think that there would be some transfer. And so one thing is I'm not opposed to doing it on religious people. And I think that it's necessary to do that. So I don't have a problem with that. And I think there's probably some transfer of critical thinking if you're able to do that. I don't know how much occurs in maybe a 1-hour street epistemology session. I do think that sometimes maybe there isn't as much transfer. Some people struggle to have like critical thinking skills, and if you successfully convince them of one belief that's not true, so like something interesting that I think is that I find a lot of people who are not Christians, or they think those beliefs are silly, but they also believe things like astrology, crystal healing, other sort of strange metaphysical karma, what's the secret, like sort of the law of attraction, these sorts of things. So I think that people like that in a society where they are not Christian, they'll end up having another sort of belief related.
I think you're totally right. And I think any beliefs that are held without good justification should be challenged.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I'm eager to talk to an atheist who believes because he's angry, for example, right? Anger maybe isn't the best reason to doubt God.
I definitely, especially when people make the claim that there certainly is no God, for example. That's a claim that that can be challenged and asserted, just like every other. Right. One thing I think that's important to think about is like, is what is the objective of a single street epistemology conversation, right? I don't think anybody would say that the objective of the single conversation is to change somebody's mind in that moment, even if the view is held for bad reasons, right? Essentially, street epistemology just hopefully encourages somebody to notice there's this different path that they might want to think about wandering down, right? But it's not going to grab them by the hand and show them the way, right? And I think through subsequent conversations, if you do, and that's, you know, not always available as an option, right? But if you can have subsequent conversations, you can build rapport and a relationship, and you can sort of keep talking to that person. I think then you perhaps have more of an active role in changing the framework and the intuitions that they hold for their beliefs. But I think a single street epistemology conversation is just helping them notice there might be a problem, right? That's the whole objective. And if they've noticed that there's a problem, what they then do with that information, you know, it's beyond the scope of a single conversation to address, right? And we certainly don't want to be injecting our own answers to what they should do as a result of them noticing that, right? We want them to discover it themselves, and that's kind of partly why SE, I think, can be very effective, is because it's not you just saying, "Hey, the way you're thinking about this is wrong," and you need to change your view. It's you saying, "Hey, have you thought about this?" And then they notice, actually, that doesn't make any sense, does it? And when they're doing that, noticing that it's much more effective. So yeah, I think the objective is definitely important here.
I wish Reid was still here, because he could pull up a video clip in 3 seconds. But there's this guy, Tyrone Wells, who has a channel called Let's Chat. I think that's what it's called. And he does this thing sometimes where he'll actually talk to people about their belief that Marvel is better than I don't know who's
DC.
the competitor to Marvel. DC. Yeah, DC.
Oh, now everybody hates you.
Yeah. So at first, when I saw this, I was like, what a waste. How stupid to talk about this. Like, he's missing an opportunity to talk to someone about, you know, treating each other poorly in the world. But what I realized is that what he's actually doing is taking someone who isn't at that point. They're not at the point where they're ready to sit down and talk about the rights of Black people or something like that. But to slow down and have a conversation where you talk about what are some objective things we could look at? How could we convince someone who disagreed with us? These are important tools for
sometimes even
any
just introducing the idea of objectivity. Sorry, to stand
right.
but
Yeah.
that sometimes is like, I mean, how many times do we get bogged down in conversations with somebody really just failing to understand the difference between an objective and a subjective experience, right? Or knowledge that's objectively or subjectively true. It seems like even sometimes introducing that concept alone, it might be enough of a pebble in the shoe. I mean, you think about how much you can really convey to somebody who's not really sure about the difference between those ideas in one conversation. I think just as a starting them down the path, just introduce that idea. I think that's that's pretty powerful.
I put a link to his channel in the chat.
One of the issues I think I would have with the Marvel versus DC, is it would be kind of, so you'd be trying to teach people how to use good reasoning or how to evaluate evidence on a totally subjective thing, which I think may be an error. Because if I said, let's compare the color of red and blue, and let's determine what's good evidence for why one color is better than another color, but there is no correct answer to which is better. And so all your evidence is not going to be, you're not going to have confirming or disconfirming evidence. You're not going to have good methodologies, I suppose. Or you could have good,
I would love to ask you some SE questions about what I'm hearing you say.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong. But one of the things that I picked up, one of the things that I heard, is that for a lot of these things like social justice and all these things, that there are correct answers. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
How confident are you that there are objective answers to, let's say, questions about police or things like that?
97%.
Okay. What's getting you to what makes you so confident that there are like objectively correct answers?
So I believe that there are objectively true things, and I also believe in objective morality. And so if a claim is coherent, then I think that you can say it's true or false. And I think that in the area of critical social justice, they make claims which can be evaluated as true or false.
Okay, so just to make sure we're on the same page, do you think that everyone thinks that, let's start really high level. Do you think everyone believes in objective morality?
No, of course, no.
So what do you think these people who would disagree, what do you think their arguments are?
I think that their arguments would be something like, we don't have morality only applies to individuals. There's no moral reality out there. It's totally dependent on the individual's opinions, in the same sense that like something being aesthetically beautiful is on the basis of someone's opinions. Yeah.
And that doesn't hold any weight for you. Is that what I'm hearing?
It somewhat makes sense, but I'm a moral objectivist. I don't think it's correct reasoning. I can understand why people believe that, though. So
what can you give me, like, some of the things that get you up to this? You said 97%, if I remember right.
Yeah.
Like, what are your best reasons, or maybe your good reasons?
For which specifically?
For like what gets you up to 97% that there's an objective set of morals, for example.
Oh, okay. So I believe in a position called ethical intuitionism. I believe that if something seems wrong, that's at least somewhat good evidence to think that it is in fact wrong. And I think the best argument for that is just through analogy. Everything that I believe depends on my senses, my hearing, my sight, my intuitive reasoning, and so forth. Things seem true to me, and that is at least some reason to think it's true. If I deny that something seeming true to me is a good reason to think it's true, then I end up with otherworld skepticism or some sort of infinite regress. So I think that there's a foundation for empirical knowledge, and I think similarly, for that reason, I think that there is good reason that we can use this tool, intuition or perception, to also apprehend moral truths as well. Whereas since it works for reality, it should work for moral reality as well.
Okay, that's a mouthful. Let me try to state that back to make sure. No, it's fine. I just want to make sure I understand. So I think what you said was, because you, now correct me if I'm wrong, but because you think that there is an objective reality and that we can find evidence to figure out maybe which claims about reality are true and which claims aren't true, that therefore this must also apply to morals? Is that what I heard you say? Or did I miss something?
You're okay. I think that intuition and perception, so if it seems to me that X, that's at least some good reason to think X is true, a general perception, works with physical reality and also works with moral reality. So the fact that it works with physical reality is a reason to think it would also work with moral reality.
Okay. Do you think it's possible that these things could be separate? I mean, I guess you think there's a 3% chance.
Oh, well, for the claim of moral realism, maybe I would put it at 85% confident.
Okay, so a little bit less confident that the idea that there's there's objective morals, is that right?
Yeah, I'll say that, yeah.
Okay. So because there is an objective reality, if we agree that there is an objective reality and we can use evidence to get to objective conclusions, the moral world is probably similar, and so therefore we could get to objectively conclusions about morality. It is. Yeah. Okay. So there seems to be sort of a leap there where I'm not sure I understand. Why is it likely that morality works the same way as the stuff around us?
Why does it work the same way?
Right. It seems like you have an implicit assumption that morality must work the same as reality. And I'm sort of not quite following.
I would say I don't see a strong reason why it should not work similarly.
Okay. But I also heard you admit earlier that you don't think everybody believes this.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay. So what are some things we could do to figure out if this were the case? Like, are there things that could make you more than 85% confident?
Probably, yeah.
Can you maybe imagine some?
So it would be exposure to an argument that is convincing that I've not been exposed to previously, because it doesn't rely on, this argument doesn't rely on empirical evidence. It is kind of like relies on philosophical reasoning. Yeah. So could I ask you
yeah, please.
a claim? Okay. Do you think it's immoral to torture babies?
So it's funny because even pausing to answer this is itself funny.
Yeah.
I think usually it's immoral to torture babies. I can also imagine scenarios where it could be the moral right thing to do.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So, for example,
Yeah.
if there were a terrorist who said, either you torture this baby or I will blow up Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And I would go, I really don't want to torture this baby. But if you're going to make me, I think that's the moral choice.
Yeah. So, well, generally speaking, why do you think torturing babies is immoral? So for me, I would say it just seems obvious, right? Like, what would your justification be?
And I heard you say that earlier, right? Where you said some things seem true, they feel true, and that's maybe some evidence that it's true.
Yeah, exactly.
I think I see where you're going, but I wonder about the diversity of experience. I mean, there's certainly people who we call sociopaths, for example, who don't have the same, let's say, moral principles that come to mind immediately. And I'm like, what makes them wrong and us right?
So I think I would again go with something like an analogy, right? So there are people that have visual and auditory hallucinations. What makes them wrong and us right?
Yeah. So I think you and I could talk about, for example, experiments. But I'm sort of looking for that same thing here. Like, let's take somebody who's not hallucinating, but is sociopathic. They don't have, let's say, this. I know sociopathic is a loaded term, and I'm not a psychologist, but someone who doesn't feel empathy, let's say. And they're not hallucinating. They just don't feel empathy towards other people. How could we figure out whether they're, because I hear you making the claim that they're wrong about morality. How could we figure out that they were wrong? What experiments could we do?
Yeah, so I think you're kind of looking for an empirical experiment for a sort of philosophical argument.
Well, yeah. I mean, do you think? How do you feel about empiricism versus logic? Do you feel like one is stronger than the other, or that they're both equivalent?
I don't know if I would say equivalent, but there are truths about reality that we can figure out through our sense perception and through our reasonings. And then there are truths about the world that we can figure out through reasoning. So,
can I? I know you're going to go somewhere with this, but can I ask you a question to sort of maybe go in real sharp here?
Sure.
Let's say you had a belief where you believed it based on a logical argument, and someone came to you with empirical evidence that disconfirmed that belief. So now you have conflicting reasons, right? You've got logic that gets you to the belief and empirical evidence that goes away from the belief. Which would you favor?
I would update my prior on the basis of how probable I think the evidence is of being true, and I would weigh the evidence through different ways of what I think is reasonable to reach a posterior probability. So I might not totally discount my prior, but I'll use the empirical evidence to incorporate into my thinking.
Even though the logic is logic, it's deduction, it's rational, it's mathematical. Is that right?
Sometimes there's some logical reasoning that comes with there is always X. And I think maybe what you're getting at is, or there exists, imagine I deduced there's no such thing as a black swan, and then you show me a black swan.
Right.
I think you want me to say my logic is wrong, which I would totally concede. But most logical reasoning is like probabilistic. For this and this and this reason, I think it's more probable that X. And if you present me with evidence, I'll reduce my probability, but I won't totally throw away my prior belief unless it's absolutes. If it's absolutes, I'll throw away my prior belief.
Okay. So I think, this is a call-in show. I don't want to take everybody else's time, but I guess to step out of SE for a bit and make an observation. I think I heard you say that there isn't necessarily an experiment we could do to find out whether or not the person who lacks empathy is right. And then I guess my question, my non-SE question for you, just because we're friends now, so I can ask you some non-SE questions. Like my question is, can we really be so confident as 85% of something if there's no way to disconfirm it experimentally?
Yeah, so I think that there are like empirical truths, and then there are truths about logic in the world, and that there are some things that we probably could not like experiment on the world to discover is true. And one would be like, if you see a drowning child in a pond, should you rescue it? I think you should. You could say, well, can you find me an empirical experiment to determine whether or not you should rescue the drowning child? I think we don't have that. Yeah.
Let me give you a hypothetical experiment.
Okay, sure.
We're not going to do this experiment because doing this experiment would almost definitely be immoral. But
how did you come to that conclusion? No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
Yeah, but the hypothetical experiment would be, we could try where we legalize, or not legalize, but we actually force legally people to not save drowning children. Right? Let's just enact that law. And let's see whether society gets worse or better. Let's pick an objective criteria, the self-purported happiness of people, the, I don't know, whatever objective criteria you would like to optimize for, right? I would say happiness is part of that. And see whether it gets better or worse. My prediction is that it would probably get worse. Like, not just all of the people whose babies have drowned, but like living in a society where that's condoned goes against our instincts. And I don't even think we need to talk about it. There's a lot of reasons why I think society would go for the worse if we stop saving drowning children. And so I really feel like there is empirical evidence that could be gathered about that.
So I think you want to test if I can determine if evaluative statements are true or false. So moral judgments, good or bad, are true or false. And I say you can't really without an empirical experiment. And then I think you provided an empirical experiment in which the criteria is now judging society on the basis of good or bad, if that makes sense. You've pushed the problem further.
It seems to me that such an experiment would yield empirical evidence as to whether or not it's good or bad to drown babies.
So like if I say,
so first,
yeah.
are we on the same page? Like, do you think that would show something?
I think that you've moved it from an individual to society, but we're still using moral judgments, good and bad. Yeah.
Well, I guess I was hoping we could talk about what it means to be good or bad, like the operational definition. Maybe I misunderstood your claim, but I thought your claim was something like it is good for society. But maybe I'm hearing you say now what you really mean is it's good for an individual.
I don't want to take everyone's time. How about we have a SC session sometime?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. This was a pleasure. Thank you all for having me on very much.
Absolutely.
I don't want to see that as a cop-out. I just don't want to take everyone's time, and I have to go soon. So.
Yeah. Can we bring everybody else back in? If
of course. Yeah.
No, we're back.
Yeah. Thanks so much for doing that. I hope it wasn't uncomfortable.
No,
this is great.
I love it.
And brilliantly, you've given us the next claim that we can explore, which is Chucky's confidence that you and me are now friends. So we can test his claim on that.
So people watching may have seen us smiling at strange times, and it's because in the chat they've been saying things about a manual for torturing babies. And
it's slander. You've got no evidence. That was awesome.
Yeah. Thanks for doing that.
Could I call in maybe next week or the week after? We could have that conversation.
Anytime.
Yeah. All right. Have a great day, guys. Thank you very much for having me on.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right, we have in the wings. Do we want to give any feedback to Chucky before we bring Lisa in?
Yeah, please.
Terrible.
Quick question, Chucky. What was the claim?
I think the claim that we wound up with was there are objective moral truths. Now he can correct me if he thinks that actually we were talking about something else. Then I've made a huge mistake. But I believe that was the claim. There are objective moral truths.
Yeah, that was basically would be my feedback. Is I felt like the claim was really wild at the beginning, and I think you guys leapt into it before you'd really nailed it down. And then we were talking about like a worldview that was really a set of claims. And like for a moment, I wasn't sure whether we were exploring the existence of this worldview or what those claims were. The other thing I thought was like there was a word that was so important, I think, to the nature. They're so important. He's just a meme king now.
I know he's got these clips on speed dial.
So there was a word that was really important to the nature of the whole conversation that was never really clearly defined, which was morality. What is a moral statement? What is morality? And I felt like, whilst it's really easy to assume you guys are on the same page about what that is, sometimes you're not, and sometimes just defining it helps bring attention to what it means, what the thing you're talking about actually is. So yeah, that was.
I think you're right. I would also push back on even that. My experience has been that sometimes for certain people, I'm not saying that what's his name? Parisia. I'm not saying that Parisia. Sorry, how do you say it?
Parisia.
Mr. P. I'm not saying that he is this way, but I think some people get frustrated when you talk too much about definitions, and I think there's a charitable thing you can do where you don't talk about the definitions until you realize that there's a problem.
So one of the ways you can address that is by saying, like, I want to use your definitions. Like, I just want to make sure I'm using your definition. I feel that way it's not confrontational. And
I guess I'm just thinking, like, if I'm talking to my family, for example, like my father in particular has this thing where he just stops as soon as I say, what do you mean by morality? My father goes, what is wrong with you? Okay, we've got a cat.
I'm sorry, but that was just the cat was moving, and I know that me and everybody else was just staring at the cat. So
that's fine. That's fine.
He's a beautiful beast.
Look at that.
That's a beautiful cat.
They're just roaring up at this point now. Sorry, Chucky.
But yeah, I think there's give and take, right? Like I don't like to get into a semantics discussion unless it becomes clear that the semantics is the problem. Personally, that's just my.
Yeah, I hear you, and I've definitely been entrenched in those places, but I've also had a conversation that's gone on long enough without clarifying it, and then clarified it right at the end and really wished I had, even though it was so obvious and we definitely should have been on the same page.
All right. Hi, Lisa.
Yeah, painful.
Hello.
Welcome.
I wasn't sure if this is the right way to call in.
Yeah, you're good.
Yep, this is it.
It's a virtual call-in.
Yeah, so I have a question for all of you guys. I just got back from, had our SE meeting here in Salt Lake today, and we were talking about some stuff, and I was wondering what you guys thought about using SE for like helping people make personal decisions in their life. Like, I don't know, maybe it's been done and I just haven't seen it, but like it just kind of crossed my mind, and the other people are even newer than I am, so they weren't sure. But like I've been trying to decide for myself, like, should I go back to college and finish up my degree, weighing the pros and cons. And I was wondering if that kind of thing would be useful. Like if I make the claim, I should go back to college.
Yeah, I love this kind of thing. We were talking a bit about this last week, but I feel like street epistemology should be used on friends and family if they they're going, I don't know whether to go back to college. And it's really hard to do it on yourself, but if you can get a friend to go through the process and say, well, what do you think might happen if you go back to college? Right. And start something like that.
It can help take the emotionality out of a claim. I mean, I think when there is real things at stake, and there's also, things like concern, fear, trepidation, nervousness, anxiety, when those things are at stake, we inherently tend to make irrational decisions. We allow those sort of feelings to drive the conversation. And it's not to negate those feelings, but to recognize, are those feelings responding to anything meaningful? Is there a genuine threat? Do we really know that there's something scary about this? Or do we really know that there's something that's going to be awkward or uncomfortable about this experience? What do we know is going to be the outcome? What do we, and then here's a great question as well. Is there anything that we can do to find out more to help us answer these questions, right? Like quite a lot of the time, the effort of anxiety, anxiously sort of contemplating a difficult decision consumes all of your present energy, but you rarely do something to alleviate it, do something constructive to alleviate it. When looking back, like if it was somebody else saying this to you, if somebody else was sat there and saying, I'm anxious, you'd say, well, why don't you read up on the course? Why didn't you just send them an email or something? Like, why didn't you do something positively? But of course we don't when we're feeling in the anxious mood. If it's us, none of these thoughts get in because we're too busy dealing with the emotionality of the things.
Yeah. And I've talked to other people, and some people will just go right to their opinion. Yes, you absolutely go do this, or like, nah, you're too old. Like, forget it. Like,
isn't it horrible to go to someone to talk out a problem you're having, and for them to immediately say, "This is the solution"?
Yeah.
Horrible.
Like,
exactly.
How do you know it's a solution for me?
Hey, the one thing I know for sure is you put less thought into that than I have.
Right.
Yeah. And I feel like I'm like right around the 50-50 mark. I could go either way, and I don't know. Like, and
is this something that you'd like to talk with somebody else about?
Yeah. Well, that's
so
what
I've
I was
already done.
Like,
I've already done
a
one.
claim
Do you guys
to
want to do
explore.
one?
Sure.
I think Diamond should do this one.
Diamond.
I'd be happy to.
Okay.
I'm curious first, like, did you already do an SE session like this earlier today?
No.
On this claim? Oh, you haven't yet?
No,
Cool.
I haven't. No.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, let's dive in. And this was something like doing SE on this sort of claim was discussed a couple months back on the Discord server, and people were talking about creating like a whole survey on that kind of thing as well. So it makes total sense. But I guess the first thing we can talk about is just, yes, my cat is the first thing I want to talk about.
Adorable.
Because, thank you. But yeah, so just to establish the claim, you said you should go back to college. Is that the claim?
I'm putting it in a positive form, a positive statement, so it's easy to break apart, right? So the claim, I should go back to college.
This is why it's great doing SE with someone who's experienced in SE, because you already know what makes this easier, right? Is putting it into a positive claim. That's great.
Yeah. Well, I'm
So
still
you know,
learning. But yeah.
you know what my next question will be is what your confidence is, right?
50.
On any 50%. Okay.
1 to 100.
Gotcha. And
50.
I guess I'll also ask, on that same scale, what would a 1 mean? And what would 100 mean?
Okay, 1 would be absolutely no, don't do it. 100 would
Okay.
be you should do nothing else but go back to college.
Gotcha. So 50 means you're kind of undecided either way.
I could
You're
go
totally
either way.
unsure. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. And so what brings you to that either way? Is it you got a lot of reasons both ways?
Yeah. What brings me to the 50, I would say it's I got my associate's degree a couple of years ago. So I just finished it up. And so I have this entry-level job with an associate's degree, and I'm almost 50 years old. So like I could go to the next level if I have a bachelor's in the field that I'm in. So there would be some payoff to doing that. But also it's really hard and it takes a lot of time. And it took me like 10 years to get my associate. So I'm not, well, I was raising kids and doing other things at the same time. But so now they're older. But so I'm just waffling back and forth. But the 10 years that I took to get the damn associates was so stressful. I don't know if I'm ready to just dive back in there and start.
Right.
I don't know. That's why I'm waffling so much.
So the next level you're thinking of is the bachelor's level. And how long do you think that'll take, roughly?
2 years, probably.
Okay.
If I do it full time, yeah, maybe.
Right.
I haven't really looked into it.
Yeah. So, and the benefit from that would be primarily financial, it sounds like, and going up a level in your career. And
it would give me more options, career options.
Gotcha. And then the downsides that was making you hesitant, it was just the difficulty of it, the challenge, so to speak.
Stress levels. And part of it's like my kids are older now, so I don't have that as much of a factor. But I had a lot of guilt, like saying I can't do anything this weekend with you guys because I got to study or write a paper or whatever. And so that's less of a factor now, but still, like all the time, I don't know. It doesn't come easy to me. I put a lot of time and effort into it just because I want to do well.
Right.
So it'd be a bachelor's in biology is what I would go for, probably.
Cool.
Although I'd probably rather do psychology, but I want to do both.
Yeah, I guess that's also a question of like, even if you did go back to college, like which track would you do? Like that's already a separate question, right?
Right.
Of like which major or anything. But what would the alternatives be if you didn't go back to college?
Keep doing what I'm doing, which I like my job. I work at a medical lab. I really like it. And I have 7 days on, 7 days off. So it gives me a lot of time to do other things, which I love. So if I do school, I would not have that. But I'd have like school vacations, I suppose. So it would be a different schedule. What was the question? I don't know. I was rambling.
Yeah, just like what the alternatives would look like. If you didn't go back to college, like what would life look like otherwise?
Probably just keep doing what I'm doing and be okay with that and just accept it and not ever have my bachelor's, which I don't know if I'm okay with that. Just to have that piece of paper is kind of means something, but does it really? Does it matter at the end of the day?
Right.
Maybe there's something else I'd rather do.
Yeah.
That I haven't thought of yet.
What does that piece of paper mean to you? Like, what does the bachelor's mean?
And I could go up to the next level, but what if I hate the next level? I don't know. Like, there's no guarantees. So I spend 2 years sacrificing time, money, and energy, and then still I end up not liking what I'm doing, and now I'm 52 instead of,
Right.
but like, I don't know. That's why I'm.
How do you
Going
think
back
you
and
could
forth.
find out? Is there any way of like testing it without actually doing it? Is there
Yeah.
a good way of examining the outcomes of going back to college without committing? Like, how could you investigate
know.
that?
I don't know that. How could I investigate? I could put more time into like trying to figure out other options. Like if I don't want to keep doing what I'm doing, see what else is out there maybe. But I feel like I've done that the
Right.
last year or so that I've been doing this job that I'm in.
Gotcha. So,
I
and
don't
it
know.
does sound like you have like a little bit of dissatisfaction in the current state. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it just doesn't pay much. So I'm
Right.
like, I would like to be able to buy a house and do normal people things.
Gotcha.
Be in a more
And-
financially stable position.
And so if you do get a bachelor's, like it sounds like there's an assumption there that you will get a better paying job
Yeah.
compared to if you did something else to elevate your income. I'm trying to think of what other alternatives,
Right.
like maybe some other, you maybe do a career change that might lead to better pay,
Different industry or a different field altogether.
yeah, like an
Mhm.
apprenticeship in something else, perhaps. Or maybe
Yeah.
you just blow up on YouTube with your new channel. That would
Chances
be cool.
are great. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I'm not doing that for the money.
Gotcha. Okay. So
yeah,
it is
I don't know.
primarily though the well, I guess I think I heard two reasons, because you mentioned the financial improvement, and then you
Mhm.
also mentioned the value of just the bachelor's, that paper, right? That signifies something.
Mhm.
And I wanted to explore just a little more on that side of things. What, like, well,
Yeah.
I'm bad sometimes about having short questions, so I apologize. But maybe I should just, between those two, how do you weigh those in your reasoning? Like the value of just having the
Oh.
bachelor's versus the financial side. Like what levels would you break those
Which
up?
one has more weight? Maybe,
Yeah.
or
Yeah, exactly.
on the scale.
Yeah.
I think it's right now probably the financial side, because I've kind of like after I got my associates, I'm like, I'm done with college like forever. I'm never going back
Mm-hmm.
because
Because
don't
you remember what it
want
was
to.
like.
It's too hard. Yeah.
Yeah.
Too time consuming. So I don't know, but I would say it's a financial aspect at this point, because I
Okay,
do look
would
at
be a
the
majority.
job listings and the minimum requirements, bachelor's degree and lab
Right.
experience. And now that I have the lab experience, I've been there for over a year,
Mhm.
that I could apply, but I don't qualify. So, and
Mm,
it's probably at least a 50% pay jump. So it
right.
would
Wow,
be
that's
significant.
Yeah, sure.
So
Okay.
I don't know. But even just talking about it now like this helps me clarify it in my mind. So
Cool. Good.
even
Yeah,
if I
so
still don't know what to do, like just saying it out loud helps me. So I appreciate this.
yeah, no problem. Glad to chat about it. So maybe you haven't shifted necessarily either way, but you can clarify the reasons for or against going back to college. I think
I've shifted
Mhm.
on a little more towards the side of not going and exploring other options
Mhm.
before I decide, at least.
Right.
Just to see what else there is that
Yeah.
might come
Yeah,
up.
I mean there's a lot out there for sure.
Yeah.
It's
Because I really don't want to give up doing SE or my SE group
Right.
or spending time with my sisters and my family and that. So if I have to sacrifice that, I don't think it'd be worth it. Like the piece of paper is less important to me, I think.
Yeah.
So
cool. All right.
Yeah.
Well, we can
Thanks.
pause there and bring people back.
Yeah, that's
Thank
a
you,
good spot
Lisa.
to
I
stop.
appreciate the chat.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, that was
Thank
great.
you so much.
That was really good. Yeah, I like that.
What did I miss in terms of questions that you all would have liked to hear?
Doug had an interesting question or like way to test the potential claim. Take the percent increase in possible pay from having a degree, less costs, and see how many years it takes to break even. It's maybe
That
another
sounds
way
like math.
coming from the finance guy.
I think that was a really interesting place in the conversation when it became the motivation. It initially felt like the motivation was about the value of that piece of paper to you emotionally. And then there was a real big sudden shift in the conversation when you said it felt like the reason for the paper was to attain a higher salary and to change careers.
Yeah.
That was just and that's what I love about SE, because there are all kinds of assumptions we could have made about your motivations at the very beginning, but because of the questions and the way we kind of got there, it really did uncover this underlying motive that might have otherwise lay hidden in that, which was quite huge. Yeah. In terms of,
sometimes all you need to do is talk about around a belief, talk about the things involved in a belief. And I feel like people come away understanding the belief better.
Yeah, I like Pine Creek's comment there.
Don't encourage him.
Pro bono, Doug.
Yeah, that was Diamond. I always like your conversation style. You're just such
very conversational.
Yeah, very conversational, very friendly, but also like you're asking really good open questions. I hate you because you're just much better at this. But it's really nice to hear. Yeah, it was very friendly. There was like instant rapport as well. It was like very calm personality, sort of generates this instant rapport, I think, and that was really nice. I think one of the things that's difficult when exploring, and this could occur to me, was if you're exploring a claim like this about sort of a personal issue, a decision that needs to be made, it can get very personal very quickly, and that could be something that's uncomfortable for both the street epistemologist and the interlocutor, because our lives are big messy balls of mud, right? And we have to try to figure out all of these things, and tied in there is everything that we consider important and valuable about ourselves, and things that we normally deeply try to protect. So maybe when exploring these kinds of claims, we need some additional caveats, maybe, or just some clarity about, hey, if I ask you a question that's not, that you're not comfortable answering, maybe just, you don't feel free not to say that's not relevant, or I don't want to talk about that. Like, that's fine. And I guess be aware as a street epistemologist, if you're in that territory, that, you don't know what you're going to uncover. Skeletons in the closet.
Can I say something on that? I found it's really kind of a lot like doing therapy a little bit, because it does bring up these deep-seated emotions, and it can get really down to the core and make you question, who am I and what am I doing here? So, and that's what I love about it too.
The best question to do that is a live stream on the internet. Don't even think about that being the appropriate place to do.
Yeah, I'm going to start streaming my therapy sessions. But yeah, it's interesting, right? Because a question about should I go back to college really turned into a question about what are your values?
Right.
Values, yeah. What are your deep-seated values?
Yeah. Do you value money or prestige more? And like that, it's such a
And there's an opposite of those things as well, right? There are things that we might feel about those things, but also things that we might be comfortable saying about those things, right? So some people, and I'm not saying this is what was happening with you, Lisa, but I guess in the context of like these kinds of conversations, people may feel like money is their main motivator, but absolutely not want to say that because it will make them seem, like materialistic, for example. They might value, adoration, and so in fact, we all value money, adoration, popularity, so all those things, but we also know that you're not supposed to say those things. You should see Reid's hair before he does a live stream. It's terrible. He spends 6 hours in up just getting his hair ready for the stream because it's important to him, and he values that, and so that's
But he'd never admit it.
He'd never admit it. He'd never show you the I think he has a separate like hair channel where he just does. It's a hair stream on Twitch that he
tutorials
and just guides.
You can take me out now if you want.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thanks for calling in, Lisa.
Thank you,
We
Lisa.
can take more
Lisa.
callers.
Thank you. Excellent.
Yeah, so
I'm
maybe
only
we
jealous
should-
because I've got none. There's just nothing there anymore. It's all just
So
going away.
for people who are just joining us, we're taking calls to either go through an SE session with us, or if you have questions about SE, or you just want to complain like the Reddit has been doing lately, we can talk about any of this stuff.
Has Reddit been complaining? People have got hot takes on Reddit. What is
There's
this?
been,
What are we in?
for some reason, this last week has been a lot of posts like, I'm quitting SE because all they do is talk about Christianity.
Oh wow. Okay, really?
I mean, I'm saying a lot. There's probably been like 5 posts in the last week total, but
A torrent of posts.
deluge.
I can't. Who's been talking about Christianity? Yeah, I can't
Can't think of
remember
anyone.
Yeah,
Well, I think so to be fair, to give credit to this idea, right? And I think Reid did this earlier here. If you pull up Anthony Magnabosco's YouTube channel, right, over 90% of them are about religion.
So
Yeah.
but there's a component here of him standing in a public space in America, in Texas, right? He's
Yes.
asking people to talk about a belief that they have,
Especially a deeply held one.
a deeply held belief. Is it surprising? So is it SE that's creating all of these religious topics, conversations, claims, or is it Texas that's causing these, generating these claims?
I wouldn't say it's Texas. I mean, I think if you go to anybody and you say, do you have a deeply held belief? Either you'll get someone who says, yes, I believe in a God, or you'll get someone who says, no, I'm not religious. Like
I'm really open to Diamond's question here is like, is there a way we can invite somebody to explore a claim with us, give them every context that we need to so that they understand what we mean by a claim without
and I think the word belief there is even charged, right?
It really
you say
is,
belief, it implies almost for many people supernatural.
Something with which you think is true about the world.
I like that one better, yes.
Yeah. I've tried, so I've gotten a lot of people from Facebook, and I try to give examples like Reid does. I think that works pretty well too.
Yeah.
But there's so many more beliefs that we have that we don't talk about, right? Like, I believe my parents are in their house right now. That sort of just
what's your
very
confidence?
parochial. Yeah, right. You could totally SE just that.
Sure.
And Chucky, you mentioned earlier that you felt like that might be just a waste of time to do these.
I used to think.
Okay, so not so
I
much
don't
anymore.
No, in fact, I think that there's real value, especially if you're talking to someone, because I think a lot of people have these barriers, right? I don't want to talk about anything. I think there's value in going through the exercise with them about something that you both agree on that's super neutral. Like, like you say, that your parents are in their house. Anthony has one, it's like half a conversation, but he starts with, how confident are you that your mother is your mother?
That's great. Yeah. Like, what are your reasons for believing that? Yeah. Oh, but I mean,
and there
if
are
it
reasons.
goes wrong, that's going to go really wrong. In any case, but
there are legitimate reasons.
And maybe that's one thing that we should be doing more, maybe, is suggesting like hyper neutral claims, because like that takes the heat out of it. But really, if the important thing is to introduce the idea of reducing confidence where we don't have good reasons to be confident, right? So I think in this moment, like Diamond would acknowledge, like he doesn't really have great reasons to believe that his parents are in their home right now. Like largely, I would imagine this is based on an expectation of where they normally are, right? Like there's a historical record, so maybe that's pretty good evidence. That's probably supporting. But in terms of like, if you were to say, look, your life's on the line, are your parents at home or not? You probably would err on the side of yes, but you'd be like pretty nervous still, right? It wouldn't be a surefire thing. And like, I think even, you might say, even just a sort of purely academic in that context, exploration of the reasons why he was confident, I think still has value and takes the heat of this away completely. And maybe the tic-tac test, for example, is it odd or even? How do we know? What do we know? Those kinds of things are kind of useful, but maybe we could find something that's more of a claim about the world.
So Nathan was on the show last week and has talked about this a couple times, but like, there's this idea you hear when you talk to people who are religious, and they say, I have faith, just like you have faith that your wife loves you. And I feel like this is a fantastic claim to SE. Does your wife love you, or your spouse, or your husband?
Such dangerous territory.
But I think this is such a fantastic question, because there is real objective evidence for this. I mean, there should be, right? If there's not, like you say, then you're in trouble. But like, the way that they put their hand on your shoulder when you feel down, the thing that they say in the morning to wake you up, like these things are evidence.
Tim Minchin has a good line on this. He says, love without evidence is stalking.
Yes. Yeah. I saw we had a question in chat from Retrovo. Do any of you have claims that you won't explore or are not interested in exploring?
Ooh, I don't think so. I don't think it's the claim that would make me not want to explore it. I think it's the disposition of the individual making the claim that would make me pause and hesitate. So I don't think there's a particular claim that I wouldn't explore. At least I'm not aware of one. But I think any claim made a certain way, and an individual, for example, could behave a certain way that would make me not want to explore almost any claim. Like, it's more in the nature of the person asking. But I don't think there's anything intellectually I wouldn't explore. How about you, chaps?
Yeah, most descriptive claims, most normative claims, some subset of normative, like merely preferential, like I really like chocolate better than vanilla. Like, I don't really care to talk to you about that. Unless you're making a claim that all stores should stock a specific flavor of ice cream because I like it.
Right.
That's more.
White chocolate should be outlawed. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that the venue matters. So I wouldn't necessarily explore all claims publicly, and I wouldn't necessarily post all claims. But certainly engaging in the conversation, if I feel interested and have the time, then I don't restrict it that way.
It could certainly make a disingenuous claim that it wouldn't clearly not really but just being silly, for example, not really making an actual claim. And one of the things is what are the characteristics of a good claim to explore, and I think that's kind of the same question in a different way, right? And like, I think the characteristics of a good claim that we try to tease out are something that's important to somebody. And I think one of the framings I've used here is that they would act differently in the world if that claim was to be, if that claim was to be changed, or whether it's true or false. If it would matter to them, they would act differently as a result of it being different. And I think that's a good indicator of a claim that's worth exploring for sure.
Yeah. Digital Gnosis says, this is where I think SE can be criticized. There's an assumption that most beliefs should be held for reasons. Are those reasons held for reasons? And so on. We have a lot of irrational hinges. I'm not really sure. Like, certainly there are things, but are there a lot of things? I'm not so sure about that.
Sorry, can you bring that back up again? I was just rereading it for like the second time. This is where I think SE can be criticized. There's a lot of assumptions that most beliefs should be held for reasons.
And I think he's defining reasons as like conscious reasons, rational reasons, not mere like, physiological things happening unconsciously.
Right. I think where I agree with that is that I think we all hold a lot of beliefs that we have not yet examined. Maybe that's...
Sure. I would say you can hold a belief on on just faith if you like, but it would be better to hold a belief on evidence. And I think like it would be better to hold a belief that was really impactful on your life on better evidence, right? So there's the Sagan standard, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. But I like to think in the context of SE, there's like an impact vertex here, where like an extraordinary claim that has very little evidence that impacts you not at all is kind of not really that significant in the SE space, right? I mean, you're welcome to believe that there's a pink unicorn behind you at the moment, and you know, and if it doesn't, and it's invisible also, by the way, and you could test the claim that there's an invisible pink unicorn behind you, but if it doesn't impact your life on a day-to-day basis, does it really matter? But there are claims that really do impact people's lives, that really do have a significant, you know, effect on people, and that they will make choices in their life that not only impact them but those around them and other people in the world that essentially are really important that they get right. And if they're holding those kinds of claims on bad evidence, then I think that's something that's really useful to SE.
And I'd say, if Digital Gnosis, if you want to come on and explore the idea further, by all means. One thing I'm wondering about is he's saying that SE is making an assumption about that these beliefs should be held for reasons. So how do we know that SE or the SE practitioner is making these assumptions? Just, is it because they're asking questions?
But what does it mean to hold a belief without a reason? Like, I mean, even you know, somebody who is in a religious context, for example, who may believe a particular God exists and is true, there's a reason why they believe that. Like, the question is,
but if it's unexamined, they're not aware of the reason. I think that's the idea.
Well, it's certainly examined, right? I mean, so I mean, I don't think anybody has a belief that is entirely ex nihilo, right? It doesn't just appear in their mind
it doesn't, and yet they're still not aware of the reason. So, like for example, go back 20 years before the flat Earth thing was a thing. Most of us believed in a round Earth, and yet we had never sat down and thought, why do I believe in a round Earth? Now, if we had been asked, right, then we'd go, well, I've read it in a book in second grade, and I've seen pictures of the Earth, but they've never thought about it.
Sure.
So they weren't aware of their reasons.
But there were reasons, right? There were reasons,
yeah.
Right, and that's kind of my point. We're arbitrating between the quality of the reasons. Hey, buddy, how you doing, Nathan?
Welcome.
Hey, I've been bullied into coming in by the chat. So.
Welcome.
Yeah, it was a good question. Now we're having a fight.
So, do you want to help us? Do you want to help us unpack what your claim was, Nathan?
Yeah. So I suppose where it comes from is that suppose in the methodology of SE, suppose someone makes a claim, and then after establishing someone's confidence level in that claim, the next question is, well, what's the main reason that you believe that claim, right? And so suppose someone does provide, you know, sort of adequate reasons, whatever they might be, in favor of that. But then there's going to be this further question about, like, well, why do you think, you know, why do you believe those reasons, right, which inferentially justify the claim that you made? And then there's going to be that question for those reasons that they hold. And all of these things are going to, I mean, they could go on this is like the classical trilemma in
turtles on turtles.
Yeah, they could go on like infinitely. Maybe they could be like circularly justified, or they could be like foundational in some sense, right? Now, my point of view is basically just to say that somewhere. So if we actually suppose we explored someone's entire web of things that they believe, there's just going to be like these random sort of stopping points in places that aren't necessarily like. I think it would be wrong to say that they're like irrational, but I think that they're also not like rationally justified. Like maybe something like someone believing that their mother is a claim like that, where like it's just not really believed as the upshot of like assessing evidence or something, but it's just this belief that's like held because they were socialized into it or whatever.
I like this. Sorry.
So go ahead.
If you had said, you know, the belief that we're not living in a simulation, I'd see where you were coming from, because what evidence do we have of that? But I have tons of evidence that my mother is my mother. I mean,
I'm not saying you
was
have
there when I was a child. right? Huh?
So the claim isn't that you could, for some of these what I'm calling hinge commitments, the claim isn't that for all of them you couldn't in principle have evidence, but the claim is that people don't actually believe them as the upshot of evidence, or that maybe that they're not doing something wrong when they believe these sorts of things, not as the upshot. So like an example I could give in that case is, yeah, maybe that's like closer to where the disagreement would be. So like I'm adopted, for example, right? And so I think like for a period of time in my life, I probably believed that, you know, like my parents were my parents just because that's what I was like socialized into. And there's obviously evidence that I could like have found, but I could also have gone on like living my life forever and also never found out. And it's like, would I have been doing something wrong in that case, or should I like, you know, I just think that people just have these kind of hinge commitments. So, yeah,
I got you. So that changed for me the moment you said doing something wrong. That was huge. So I've said this. I've used this example before. If somebody has grown up in like the hardcorest, you know, town in the hardcorest section of the Bible Belt of America, and have been brought up their whole life to believe, for example, that homosexuality is abominable, like could not be tolerated, is sinful, is the spawn of the devil, and that all homosexuals are evil. That person has grown up in that community their whole life. Every parent figure they've ever encountered has reaffirmed that narrative. Every book they've read that have been allowed to read, every piece of media content they've been exposed to has been carefully either reinforced that narrative and has never undermined that view. And that person, to their knowledge, has never met anybody to counter that view. I don't think that they would be wrong in holding that view necessarily. Like, even though it's a modern day abhorrent idea, I think that at that point in their life, if they've never had any evidence to the contrary, and all they've ever heard from people who they depend on for their truth claims about all kinds of things. So, you know, your parents will tell you, don't stick the fork in the electrical socket, right? And you have to believe them. You can't test that claim. That's not the kids that test that claim don't do very well. So we have to believe our parents, right? And so if those same voices, those same positions of authority are reinforcing these other ideas, you would be foolish not to believe them as a child, to grow up to believe these ideas. And I definitely wouldn't blame you for holding any idea. But if you come into contact with different evidence and you start to see that evidence, and then you maintain the idea, and that idea therefore is irrational as in response to that evidence, then I think you're being, then there's a problem. And then I will say that, you know, you're being irrational because there's better evidence there. There's some evidence that you're having to ignore to maintain this view. So I think that's when and most of the time within SE, it's pointing out to people that the framework for coming to knowledge that they normally apply to everything else in their life, they're somehow choosing not to apply to this one special thing. It's not like we're teaching people logic or teaching people to value critical thinking in an SE conversation. They already do value those things. It's just that for some reason, sometimes you can choose not to apply them to every area of your life. And so it's just pointing out, hey, look, based on your own framework of rational critical thinking, how do you feel about this if you look at it differently, right? And I think that that's what SE is trying to do here. But blaming anybody for believing any of it, I think is, yeah, definitely not what we're here to do.
It looks like Peter tested the claim that you know, it's a bad thing to put a fork in the outlet. I also tested that claim.
It's safer in the US than in Britain. So
okay, fair enough. Yeah, so we don't have many inquisitive British people because they were taken out of the gene pool there. That's probably true. It's a great claim. It's a great comment, I think, and it's definitely worth thinking about for sure. I think the moment you find yourself looking to blame the person or fight against somebody's view as a street epistemologist, and you've stopped really, I think, thinking about the epistemology, like helping them notice how they got there.
So this rubs against. Oh no! You go ahead.
I was going to say, but supposing you accept that, then would you have to say that if if someone has like a false belief system, right, but it's consistent with itself, then you'd have to be like, well, that street epistemology sort of bottoms out at that point, like it can't.
So how do we identify what a false belief system? How do we identify that? As in,
how do you tell the difference? I I'm not going to formulate this well. But yeah, it would be, how do you tell the difference between cases then where the questioner is like, it's just that they have a different like set of beliefs, but both people are consistent, but they just disagree, right? Maybe.
So mostly I would say belief systems are fundamentally tested against reality, right? Like if this belief system helps you navigate reality in effectively, like then I would say that's, you know, that belief system or that epistemology is fine, right? But if it comes into conflict with reality, then I'd say there's a problem with it. And
I think it's interesting that this is rubbing up against something that's like, it's quite deep. And I think people balk a little bit at the idea of epistemology because they say, oh, but you could use that process and be wrong. And yes, that's possible, right? Like it's possible to believe false things for good reasons. But is that often the case, right? Does that happen most of the time? Like, the fact that you believed your parents were your parents, you were wrong for good reasons. But as soon as you found conflicting evidence, did you update your belief? I think that's the question. Is there anything in this world that leads you to believe, you know, what Will's example earlier about homosexuality, you know, is there anything that conflicts with your belief?
I think I agree with that, but I think then the upshot of that is something that seems a bit strange to me, which is like, is someone then obligated to come up with like conditions of verification for like every single belief that they hold then?
Yeah, I wanted to speak to that as well, because sorry, did I interrupt you? My apologies.
No, you didn't. Honestly, yeah.
I'm so good at that. I want to make sure. So what I think is certainly true is, like, if you say I love my mum and somebody says, well, you need to prove that claim, and then you say, well, okay, first of all, you need to prove the existence of external reality, right, as a foundational claim. Otherwise, we can't even begin to start talking about. This is, of course, nonsense, right? The idea that human beings need to get down to bedrock certainty to have better or worse reasons for believing in something I don't think is true, and I think that's largely not true because we don't have bedrock certainty about anything.
There's nothing. So maybe this is strong for a lot of people, but there is nothing that I'm 100% on.
Exactly, same here, and so I don't think we're looking from a bottom-up foundational philosophical position of certainty and then building a case up for why, you know, you might prefer peanut butter over Marmite, for example, right? And like, we don't have to do that. We can just say, okay, well, what is the size of this claim and what is reasonable evidence to help justify that claim? And like, you could argue about what the nature of reasonableness is, right? And certainly there's a discussion there, but we could recognize that we might believe something for better or worse reasons in any given moment, right? And and all SE is doing is not saying, look, as a street epistemologist, I know certain truth, and I can I can point out that your argument is going to be based on some assumption somewhere in your epistemological chain, because everybody's is. So it's not really about trying to go, aha, but now you can't prove this, you know, this step in the ladder, and therefore your case falls. That's
right. You may have been deluded in thinking your mother exists at all.
Right, exactly. Right. What makes you think you exist?
You've only seen her. How can you trust your eyes?
Exactly. So yeah, this is clearly would be unhelpful, and in fact, it's not what we would do as human beings, I think, right? So we're just trying to look at the sort of surrounding epistemology and say, look, you know, why did you come to this belief, and how did you get here? And it's not us evaluating. And this is another point. We're not judging your epistemology. We're not criticizing it. We're not even saying whether it's right or wrong. I think the purpose of street epistemology is specifically designed not to do that. It's designed to just encourage you to look at it and for you to think, do I think this is good or bad, actually? Now that this has been pointed out to me, am I actually comfortable believing it on this evidence? Or maybe I need to go and ask some more questions, or maybe I should be more confident in what I believe, because, yeah, it turns out I wasn't so sure, but actually it turns out I've got really good reasons to be in this position. So, yeah, I think those are interesting points for sure.
Yeah, we don't have infinite time to attempt to falsify all of our beliefs.
Oh, sorry. So, I thought you meant in the stream. Sorry.
No, like in our life. I think we'd be more rational if we attempted to falsify everything we believe and just failed to falsify it. But, you know, but I leave my questions deliberately directed to the most important beliefs that people have, because those are the most important ones to question, to actually have rational reasons for.
And I suppose just in going through the motion of questioning even these trivial beliefs, like, I'm reaching for my coffee cup and, I will feel it when I reach out. Just going through that practice of investigating that epistemology will hopefully make you better at evaluating your epistemology for other beliefs and maybe more fundamental things that do impact other people and how you live in the world.
I feel like it's a real gift when someone comes to me and says, hey, that thing that you always believed coffee cups were solid. And I'm like, yeah, of course they're solid because they feel solid. And they go, oh, well, actually things are mostly empty space. Here's some evidence for it. Like, that's a real gift to be in a position where something that you held as so fundamentally true is challenged, and then to go through that process and say, maybe the things that I am certain about, I'm wrong about.
Yeah. I think it's not about certainty, and it's not about getting all of knowledge. It's wanting to be as close to true as possible. It's wanting to have the best mental model that maps to reality as best as it can get. And I think it's also about taking as few assumptions as possible. So one of the things, like we talked about a moment ago, it just made me think about this idea of what makes for a better or worse worldview. Well, having to make a fewer number of assumptions and it's still all working out, I think would be a good indicator. I mean, the perfect worldview would take zero assumptions and be entirely provable from base principles, but I just don't think that's a move that's available to anybody. Although people do claim it, and those people should be edged away from in the bus seat. You shouldn't sit too close to these people. Arm's length sort of thing.
Yeah. So thanks, Nathan. Any other comments, questions?
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for your answers, guys. I'm not asking this, by the way, from the perspective of trying to undermine street epistemology as well. I think it's a good tool and it's really helpful and useful. But I do have some questions about the boundaries or scope of it stuff. So
that's
totally
awesome.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's very true. We all do.
Right.
Thanks, Nathan.
Thank you.
Oh, nice guy.
Next up, Mark.
We just had a
hey.
Can we not get
Welcome.
We were on a roll and now we've ruined
It's
it.
riff-raff.
Who's let him in?
Oh, guys, I just want to tell you, man, I really love this new format. This is so good. Just seeing from an outsider, just people popping in and out and just with claims and questions about SE and its utility, and just it really clarifies some things. It's even clarifies some things hearing you guys talk about it. So it's cool. I like it.
That's cool. Thanks, Mark.
Is this the famous porch that's in your videos? Or your house?
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, it's my porch. It's a nice day. I'm sitting outside. Had some
listening to some birds.
Yeah. Right before I live in right between Durham and Chapel Hill, North Carolina. So it's getting a little crazy around here because the Final Four is tonight. So yeah,
the Final Four.
Yes,
basketball.
you would not know probably what
Sports ball.
Yes, basketball.
Sports ball.
Yes,
basketball, which you guys call something else. I'm just kidding.
It's like
All right. What's your claim that American football should be called football? Does anybody want to hold that claim? Because that is a nonsense claim. There's no feet involved. It's explicitly.
That's a
There
little
is
direct
some
messaging
kicking.
there, William.
Small,
yes. Rugby should be called right. So, well, that's it, guys. I just wanted to say hi.
Hey, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks for dropping by.
Later.
Suck it. What is suck? Jesus.
All right, so we got about 25 minutes left of the show. We'd love to get one or two more callers in real quick. Feel free to call.
Yeah,
in.
if anybody wants to call. I have a question for you all. Going back to this thing we were just talking about, right? Like for me personally, it's a gift when someone says, hey, a coffee cup is full of empty space. Is that something that you agree with, or are you annoyed by it when people challenge?
Oh no, these are like mind expanders, right? They just make you, they help you see the world slightly differently, and here's the interesting thing is like they don't always necessarily have to be capital T true, right? They could just be a different mental model for looking at something, right? The assertion of truth isn't necessarily as important as hey, here's a framework for looking at the world differently, right? And sometimes that doesn't have to necessarily be true to be interesting. Like here's a way of thinking about this, right? An example of that might be string theory, for example. String theory was never proven and has been more or less soundly disproven, but it was an interesting way of exploring the problem at one point, right? It was a mental model to help us explain this phenomenon that we were seeing.
Diamond's a physicist. What do you think about
Oh
empty
shit!
space string
I
theory?
wandered off. Oh no, he's.
Well, I think you're picking one that's really easy to agree that that's great and mind expanding. But I think that there could absolutely be truths about the world that you would kind of regret finding out about, right? There could be awful things
Right.
that you
Your
learn.
brother comes to you and
Of the
convinces
universe.
you that that your mother is not your mother. Yeah.
Right. So is that a gift for you?
I think personally that would be a gift. But just
I've
because
never
my
asked you
mother
for a
is my
birthday
mother.
present.
But I think unless it was like, surprise, you're actually being tortured and you didn't realize it. Like, I think it would have to be something crazy like that, because any time I'm shown to be wrong, I feel like it's, whoa, that's so cool. How did I get to this place? The world is more interesting, more different than I thought. I love it. I don't know. Can you give a specific example?
So it turns out you have cancer. I'm sorry, you have 1 month left to live.
I think I still would. So this is not maybe as exciting to find out, but I would much
so
rather.
cool. I'm so interested in it. Wow. Like, what are the reasons you have for saying that? Oh, this.
But I would much rather know than not, because I wouldn't be able to act towards my values as effectively not knowing.
This is kind of related to that dying general thought experiment that I mentioned in the SE review show that we did recently. And I've been trying to find where this experiment came from, and I cannot find it anywhere. Like, I know I didn't invent this thought experiment.
Yeah.
With the dying general, and the guy comes up to him and says, he asks if they won the battle, and they lost the battle, but the general knows that the lieutenant knows the general is going to die in the next few moments anyway, so why not just lie and say, hey, we succeeded. Would you want to know as the general, and would you tell the general as the lieutenant, is the question. I'm sure this is an old chestnut, but I really Googled the hell out of it the other day and I couldn't find anything.
It's something, it made me think maybe an easier version of this is, your religious father is on his deathbed and he asks you, have you converted to Christianity yet? Maybe that's a more concise version.
Or ask you to pray.
It's interesting, yeah. Like, so would you, asking you to pray is an interesting one. I don't know if
I think I might pray, but I also would say, no, I haven't converted.
Here's the interesting thing about being asked to pray is, like, if you do not believe it's true, you should know that there's no consequence to you praying, except for betraying your own personal integrity. And then what value is that in comparison to the person dying? Although I just feel like I wouldn't be able to bring myself to pray, I don't think, for somebody in that situation, which might make me evil or an angry atheist or something, but I would struggle. Would anybody else be okay with that?
So quick poll. What would you three do? And maybe we could ask Chat. Would you tell your dying parent that you're actually not religious?
Or would you pray for them if they asked you to and you didn't believe that? That's the one that I struggle with. I definitely would.
What would you do, Diamond? You seem like a bleeding heart.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on how the question is asked, and if they want to really know the answer. I definitely would avoid straight up lying, I think, but maybe dodging a little bit could be appropriate. I don't know. I feel like I'd need to know more specifics.
So they ask you straight up, and you know that you know what they want you to say.
to hear.
and that you know
Right.
that any dodging's going to make them feel like you definitely
Yeah.
did.
They say, Diamond, look, I'm dying.
Right.
I need to know that you're going to be there in heaven with me. Have you
Right.
converted? And you go, oh, it's interesting weather we're having.
Right. No, so I would not, in that situation, I wouldn't say that I converted. No.
I wouldn't either.
Yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
like
I think I would say, something to the effect of, feel
Is he-
free to pray for my conversion or something like that. If that helps.
Feel free to play.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
50-50 so far.
That's
Wow.
great.
Oh.
That's great.
Oh, it's swinging back again. Oh no!
Interestingly, yeah, it's interesting how contentious this is. I've talked to people who believe that you should absolutely lie because you're doing them a harm to tell them the truth.
I don't remember that example. Wow.
I don't remember that example either.
I think this is
just
in
don't-
Sam Harris's book too, Lying.
It feels like
that-
a moral. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, lying definitely. I just don't think I could. I feel like I would rather avoid answering. Agreed. Yeah. I don't know. Here's the thing is intellectually, I don't believe there would be any negative consequence to me lying in that moment. Right? It would all be upside. The person would be briefly feel better and then pass away. I don't believe in an afterlife, and I don't believe in a God or anything. So, there's no repercussions other than the person is temporarily made to feel slightly better.
Right.
And-
to steel man that position, like what it seems so selfish to tell the truth.
It would be, yeah.
Right.
But I still don't think I could do it, and I would have to reflect on why I don't think I could do it. I think it probably is just selfishness, I would say.
But I guess okay, to anti-steel man myself, like maybe it's not selfishness. Maybe it's an appeal to a shared value of truth, right? Like if you think the other person values truth. But even then, like even if I don't think they value truth, I do. So I guess it is selfish.
But is it not also respecting them? I mean, if I thought nothing of them, I think I could lie more easily. Like if I didn't care about them, didn't know them very well, and they asked me very quickly, I think I would maybe find it. I don't know if I still would say it, but I feel like if I didn't care about the person, I think I could probably be more inclined to say that I did believe in, yeah, sure, whatever you.
Yeah, I think it's much easier to lie to someone you don't care about. At least that's how I find it.
Oscar Wilde once said, "It's much easier to be charming to someone for whom one cares nothing." And I think that's as
right,
always.
exactly. Yeah.
I wonder, did Oscar Wilde actually say that? I'm so skeptical of every quote.
Of every quote, yeah.
Well, if you read any of his plays, you'll know that he bangs them out at a terrifying rate. Like the number of things that he actually has said in his plays is just ridiculous.
All right, so how about does anyone want to come on and talk with Reid or Will about their
To make a claim?
Yeah, about
that's going to get people excited. That's not, or maybe Reid.
About their belief that maybe it's immoral or moral to tell the truth, to lie, to this kind of thing. There seems to be a lot of opinions.
Moral claims are always such muddy territory.
Those are the fun ones, though.
They are the fun ones.
Well, we can. I mean, Parrhesia says that there's an objective morality, so these should be objective claims.
Could I ask you, chaps, what do you think morality is?
What's your definition? Is that what you're asking us?
I'm asking. Well, you could make it as a definitional answer if you like, but like, how would you answer that question? What is morality?
Moving away from the worst possible misery for everyone, navigating that reality.
But why is that? Why is that?
That's the definition of bad.
The worst possible misery for everybody. So that's the moral landscape from Sam Harris, right? So that's certainly an interesting idea, but I don't know if it really explains what morality is.
Yeah, I'm not so interested in this definitional kinds of discussions. Like for me, it's I run against this sometimes, and I think this actually goes back to the moral landscape as well. It's like if you make a claim and you say this is what it means to be healthy, it's really prefixed on this idea that if you want to lead a long life, this is what you do to extend your life, right? And so I think it's the same with morality. Like if you want to blank, maximize well-being or minimize misery or increase average well-being or whatever, if you want to blank, then you do blank.
Yeah, that's quite close to what I would say. I think morality is when we make a claim with hidden assertions. That's what I think morality is. I think it's a claim like any other, but we just don't put the assertions on the table. And the reason we don't put the assertions on the table is that we feel it's much easier to get agreement that X is bad if we don't have to explain why we think X is bad. It's the utility of a moral claim is that essentially it galvanizes a response without having to justify the prepositions.
I think that's a little dark. I feel like I think it's really because...
You didn't say not true, though.
Well, I think there may be some truth to it, but I think that you can also consider it's just that most people agree on what's moral. I mean... Yes,
but most people do. But when you
assumption.
But when you unpack why do they all agree, they may disagree about the why.
Exactly. So I just don't think they're doing it consciously.
The power. Well, I sort of feel it's a socially acceptable way of galvanizing or motivating action. Essentially, we say X is wrong. If we can just all agree that the conclusion is correct, i.e., X is wrong, then we don't have to then unpack the underlying claims. But I think when people make a moral claim, it's a claim like any other. It's just that those assertions are not present, and importantly, they may become unapparent to the person making the claim. They might have just learned the conclusion: X is wrong. Why?
Yes,
well, just because X is wrong. That's what I've learned, right? Yeah. So, but it is essentially, in essence, a claim to truth, and it would go something like, I value something, and this I believe will lead to that thing, and therefore this is a good thing.
Living in a society where I would be okay playing any role, for example. That's maybe a definition of a good society or something.
Right.
Like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And like so now we've tied it to values, right?
Yes. But see, this is the thing. This is the thing about this argument, and it. I always recoil when it gets close to philosophy, because it's like someone, and maybe Nathan sort of made this point. Like you can immediately go, but what is your evidence that this is a good value? And the solution in my head, in my life, is just to say, well, yeah, we can keep doing this until we agree, right? Like the reason why I want to live in a society where I could play any role isn't just because it's a fact. It's because I want to be happy and I want fairness. And then why is fairness important? Okay, let me try it again. Right? You just keep doing it. And at some point you agree and you stop and you have a coffee, right? Like,
I think that's probably true, but sorry, go ahead, Reid.
And I like the test, like the test you can do with children to kind of help them understand what the concept of fairness is. Like you give them a piece of pie or something, and you're like, hey, okay, you get to keep as much as you like split it. You have to split it into a certain amount to share it with someone. So what should be the amount that you split it?
Right. You cut, I'll choose.
You cut, you cut on.
Yeah.
And you can do that conceptually as well with, like, John Rawls thought experiments and all that.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of gets to what I was going to suggest, which is that I think that values are derived from self-interest. And I think that selfishness is the underlying value, and that we extrapolate from that self-interest, we extrapolate other value structures.
I agree.
And then on the back of those values, we make moral claims, which are essentially hidden assertion claims.
That sounds like a claim you could SE.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. I would love to do that. Does anyone SE?
Well, you and Reid still haven't done SE, so maybe you should do it on each other.
There you go.
Oh man,
So-
that would be exhausting. In the last 10 minutes of the show, that would be
We don't have time.
genuinely
This is
exhausting.
our
Too bad. Save that for next week. Speaking of next week, can I just check in? There were some questions as to what the format is. Is this going to be regular time slot, or we're still working that out, right?
I'd like it to be regular. I think this is a good time slot. It's right in between the Discourse practice sessions, so I like it.
Yeah, I think that's the plan, is to be here so that you guys, if you think of a question during the week, you can write it down and then throw it at us over chat. Same bat time, same bat channel. That's a deep cut.
All right.
Wow.
Well, we've got 10 minutes left. Does anybody want to come on with a claim or a question or a challenge or a complaint?
Any hair tip advice from Reid?
Yeah, got that. It's all about the hairdryer first.
Is there product involved?
Yeah.
There's got to be
little bit
product
of
involved. No, that's not. That's just denial of physics right there. If you say there's no product involved,
I don't know. I used to blow dry my hair back when it was short, and it kind of stands up when you do that without any sort of product. Yeah.
Doesn't look like there's a lot of product in there. It does look quite clean. It's nice. It's a good look, definitely. Yeah. Just hair envy over here. That's all it is. Just jealous.
There's been a lot of stuff in chat. A lot of people having conversations and making claims and
They're having a whale.
challenging claims. Yeah.
Any hot takes? How's the cat situation? I think we've lost the cat, which is
We have
not...
lost the cat. Yeah.
Oh,
no,
the
he's
cat's,
yeah.
there he is. Just chilling.
Oh, he's hidden
back
in the
napping
nebula.
again. Yeah,
I mean,
that's right.
I
That's a
did-
galaxy, but yeah.
I did ask.
Excuse me.
I can't let that go.
Oh,
uncorrected.
God.
That is my favorite. That was amazing. I did. I'm sort of ambivalent as to whether Diamond should come back next week, but can we book the cat now to make sure he's available? Because I mean, I can imagine just Diamond rushing home and saying, "I've got to just set the camera up for the cat. They're not so bothered about me. I just need to get
The
this."
cat was actually the subject of an SE claim last week. So
Oh, really? What was
yeah,
the-
I made a claim during the afternoon session that cats should be indoors, but my cat is an exception. So I was claiming that he gets to be an exception because essentially he gets very unhappy if he doesn't get out like for an hour during the day. And I did this session with Gigi, and it ended up being great because one of the things that I kind of concluded from it was that we shouldn't put it on a binary. It's not just indoor cat or outdoor cat. Like the more you have a cat outdoor, I think the worse it is for the cat and society. And so if you can limit it, but you have to balance that with their happiness and my happiness.
Non-binary cats. This is where we're
Yes,
at.
I have a non-binary.
It was way ahead of
Thank you.
Oh my God, Reid.
I always think it's flying through space.
I thought so too. Is it not flying through space?
I assumed it was.
It's not a nebula. Apparently, it's a galaxy.
And that is a continuous spectra on the cat, just FYI.
Awesome. Well, this has been fun, guys. I've enjoyed it. It's
likewise.
it's silly and interesting in roughly the right measure. I think it's good.
I've got the same old call to action that I always have. Like if you were here for our conversation with Lisa, and you saw us examining the claim about Lisa should go back to college. Like SE isn't pie in the sky. I'm talking about religion, talking about ethics. It can be talking about should I go back to college or not. And so every person watching, just go have a conversation with your roommate or your sibling.
Then come back next week and tell us all about it. Did it go
Yeah,
well?
yeah, absolutely.
It's funny, isn't it? Like even the process of thinking about what claims could I make suddenly makes you think. You don't intuitively feel like you are making claims often, right? You don't notice that almost every day you actually are doing things that are based on assumptions or assertions about the world that you're essentially claiming a truth.
Yeah.
Maybe you're not really all that justified in believing. So it's
whenever I ask somebody to talk about a belief, they say, I have no beliefs. And,
Right.
and Digital Gnosis has a great example, like, who should do the dishes? Like, it's such a,
So
like,
what is the nature of that question, though? Because is that like, in order to optimize for my own personal well-being, who should do the dishes?
but in some sense, this is exactly what needs to be discussed, right? Like, you need to figure out, what are our values? What is our, agreement? Do we have an agreement?
Yeah. What evidence do you have that I haven't done it in the last 3 weeks?
Right. Yeah.
And it's clearly important enough that you should investigate it, right? Because that could be
Right.
relationship ending right there.
Yeah. Yes.
That's a good
These
one.
things matter to relationships, and they should be discussed.
I feel like Reid was going to say something, and I hope.
No, I was just looking at why the super chats function was working, and now I figured out, I got to fix something with AdSense, but that's something irrelevant.
Cool. We can do super
Ad
chats.
roll up in this.
We can start making money on these things.
Just imagine how many.
My claim is all our chats are super. That's what I'm claiming. So I love you, chat. Don't listen to this all monetizing your contributions. I think you're all lovely.
Some chats are more super.
Some chats are more super. Fair, totally.
Yeah. Anyway,
Awesome.
thanks everyone. We'll be back next week. Appreciate it.
Take care all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
See ya.